Steve, and I just wanted to explain to you initially where the name Evenings with Steve started. It all began with a phone call about 4 years ago from Rabbi Aaron at the outset of COVID. And the rabbi had the foresight to know that we were not going to have any programming in the synagogue as there was no private programming in any institution. And so he asked me to devise a program by Zoom that was creative, interesting, stimulating for the members. And that's the genesis of Evenings with Steve, although it started as Afternoons with Steve, but then turned into Evenings with Steve. This is our 33rd program over 4 years. I'm very proud to say that some of the luminaries that we've attracted to this include Conrad Black, Brett Stevens, Deborah Lipstadt before her appointment, and Dennis Ross, and many others, Max Eisen, Zikron Overraka. But it's the first time I've worn a bow tie. I just wanted to mention that as a bit of humor. But I do want to tell you about one program we had, because there's a connection to this program, and it really is so important. And I think, Catherine and Mark, you'll find this very interesting. So about 18 months ago, I came up with the idea of doing a program on hate crime, because I really had not seen any program of that nature at all in our community. And I thought it was really critical, and obviously it was before October 7th. And so we did a program. We had wonderful guests, Mark Sandler, Anna Marie Annan, and George, two brilliant lawyers, just as I have two brilliant lawyers today.
Sorry, Steve.
And we did a program on hate crime.
They need it for the live stream. Sorry about that.
No problem. All right, so I do want to welcome our live stream audience. We have probably 100 people or more who are watching and listening to us on live stream, and welcome to you. This is Evenings with Steve, and I've said that this is my 33rd program. And all you've missed is me explaining how the programs start and that this is my first program I'm wearing a bow tie. So I want to tell you about one program in particular, because it is connected to this program, and I'm so proud of it. And we can all share in the pride. So I started this program called Hate Crime, and I had these wonderful guests. And we did the program, but at the end of it, the chief of police of Toronto became aware of the program and decided that the Toronto Police Force needed to adopt a similar program dealing with hate crime. And so the Beth Sholem program, we were formally recognized by the police at the program, set up a 2-day program, and it's going to become an annual program. And indeed, the questioning that I used, the model approach of whether or not something is a hate crime or not, was adopted, and they recognized me for adopting my questioning. So I just want you to know that we can all just share in a meaningful way addressing this insidious poison that that impacts our community, Jewish community, and so many other communities so significantly. All right. So now this program. And of course, this program, it's impossible to say this program would not have occurred but for the tragic events of October 7th. The invasion, the encouraged, and the carnage, the murder, the hostage taking by Hamas in Medina Israel. And of course, everything that flowed from that. And the issues that percolated, that we're dealing with today, of course existed before October 7th, but they became amplified, the focus became greater, and we're here tonight to address it. So the first thing that happened after October 7th by the Jewish community, any community that cared about what happened, was rage, anger, and then frustration, and a variety of emotions. And then the next thing that happened is protests, and the protests continue. We just have to protest. We can't just sit idly by. We have to stand up and be counted, and also address some political accountability. But what we're dealing with tonight, and it may be the most important of all, because it's the most palpable and real in terms of consequences, is legal remedies to fight anti-Semitism, to use and harness the law as a tool, not just by protest, not just by visceral rage, but by accountability, by punishment, by dealing effectively with the law to deal with, again, this infection that has seized the Jewish community and has seized the community over centuries, not simply, a current issue, but it's the issue that we address because we're living in this age. So I thought, well, who am I going to invite to this program? And it was just a natural selection. And they'll talk about their backgrounds during the program, because I don't believe in long introductions, but Catherine Marshall and Mark Fryman are here. They're both very distinguished lawyers. They have unique backgrounds that I'm going to address in my questions dealing with the issue here. And so I just want everyone to give them a very warm welcome, please. All right. So I'm going to tell them both something they don't know, but the Beth Sholem Synagogue has made a $500 donation in each of your names, in each of your honor, to Stand With Us Canada, which is an organization that is dedicated to fighting anti-Semitism on campuses in Canada. So I wanted you to know that. And indeed, if there's going to be a reception after this program, by the way, not for you people on live stream, just a little humor. That's just an encouragement to come to the program next time. But Randy is here, and you're welcome to speak to her. She's been instrumental in developing Stand With Us Canada, and I'm sure she'll be very happy to talk to you if you have any questions or you want to become involved in this very valuable and important organization. All right. So I wanted just to tell you briefly, and please forgive me for this, just to tell you about some future programs that we have. And because, I think this is going to go, the expression bis 120? I think that they were talking about my program, not just years. Like, there are going to be 120 evenings with Steve by the time I finish. So I want to tell you about two programs that I have set. One is in March the 6th. This is our fourth year doing this. We do a pre-Oscars program. We invite Richard Krause, the most prominent film critic in Canada, and Anne Hornaday, who's the chief film critic for the Washington Post, who's just so engaging and smart, and so is Richard, of course. And so we spend 2 hours, 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, reviewing the 10 best films, if there are 10 nominated, and some of the other categories. And it's just a lot of fun. It has nothing to do with Judaism. But in a way, it's just so important to the community just to have just this incredible event to look at film in a meaningful way and study it and understand these various movies. So I just encourage you to come to that. And the other event, which is a bit more selfish, is my own event, because I'm a criminal lawyer, community event speaker. I was on television for 10 years as a legal analyst for CTV, but I'm now a writer. And so I have a new novel coming out, historical fiction, mystery. I can just tell you Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of the Sherlock Holmes stories, is the main character of my novel, and it's called Pharaoh and the Murder at Smoke Lake, and it's being launched next month, and I'm going to do an event at the synagogue on January 25th. I'm going to be interviewed by a lawyer in my firm, a wonderful young lawyer, Ryan Henlarski, so I encourage you to come out to that event as well. But there'll be other events. We're working assiduously to put together programs. We know how important these are to the community, and I develop and dedicate a robust amount of energy to keep this programming going, because every time I get a little bit down about it, I get stopped in the street and someone reminds me how important it is. All right, so let's get to the program. Everyone ready? So let's get right to the nub of the issue. And I know you speak whoever wants to first, okay? So I don't call on anyone. But here's the issue. So I've now just said something that's controversial. You may not appreciate it's controversial, but it is. Because I've said that the law can be used essentially in a meaningful way to be harnessed to combat anti-Semitism. And I just want to know if the two of you agree with me, and the two of you can just generally, without speaking about particular experience, talk about how that can occur. Mark?
Without calling on anyone.
Because no one was speaking. That's a moderator's. Let me just say one other thing before I forget. I did forget one thing. There are going to be written questions. You'll see in each row that there's a pad of paper. If you decide to ask a question, please keep it concise, succinct, and just put your hand up, and Sancha, who's the program director, will pick up the question, and it'll be handed to someone who will screen the questions, and they'll be turned over to me. So, Mark, go ahead. You two.
I think the answer is yes. The law can be used to combat anti-Semitism. I think the boundaries of how the law can be used to combat anti-Semitism are the boundaries of our own creativity. One of the things that distinguishes Canada from a jurisdiction like the United States is that we're not slaves to the concept of free speech being absolute and some sort of a holy concept that can't be challenged. And the history of the jurisprudence in Canada over the last 30 to 40 years has been one of developing remedies for the harms that speech can do to people within society. It hasn't been exclusively about anti-Semitism, but combating anti-Semitism has been in the forefront of the development of the law and of helping people to understand what 3 deans of the most prestigious universities in the United States were incapable of understanding, namely that words cause harm, and they cause real harm, and that words are actions. I always use the example of somebody who gets up on stage and says, "Folks, there's nothing better than a couple of ounces of arsenic every morning to make you feel better. Go on out and take some arsenic every morning." And anybody who can't see that that speech causes harm and is an action, and that I should be held liable for that, has lost the thread. And even the 3 august deans would know that. Yet there's something that clouds people's judgment when it comes to inflicting harm by spreading hate. So yes, the law can do it, because it already does it. When somebody gets up and says, "Go have your daily dose of arsenic." So our job is to help people to understand how the law can do exactly the same thing when hate is involved. And we'll talk about this a little more as the evening goes on. Specifically, when anti-Semitism is involved, since there seems to be a new difficulty that's descending on some of the more learned and enlightened minds in North America, an inability to see how anti-Semitism is a kind of racism, is a kind of discrimination, is a kind of hate that's the same as the kinds of hate against people with more obvious, distinctive characteristics that you can see when they appear in front of you, whereas we pass for white within many societies, not all, but many. So my short answer with the long introduction is, yeah, the law can help.
Catherine, did you want to add anything to that?
Certainly. Okay, thanks so much for having me attend today. Very nice to speak to you all. I mean, definitely the law is a tool that can be used. Whenever I get a case, I always look at the various tools at my disposal. Media is one of them. Social media, lobbying, advocacy, and within advocacy, of course, utilizing our legal systems to achieve a goal. And in this country, in Canada, we've got very robust human rights laws. Every province has a human rights code. We have a federal human rights code. We have a charter of human rights and freedoms. It's all written on paper, but these laws are useless if they're not enforced. And the way to enforce them is to use a system to hold people who are engaging in discrimination accountable. And lots of different activist groups over the years have been very effective in using our legal system to promote their human rights and affect change. And if it's done strategically, it can be very, very useful. And we do have a common law system in this country, so it is so critically important to set precedents, because the courts rely on the decisions of other adjudicators to make their decisions. So if you don't have precedents in the court system for, what defines anti-Semitism, what defines discrimination against Jewish people, if that is not laid out in decisions that have been made over the years by our adjudicators, the human rights start to erode. So we need groups, we need people who are courageous, and I call them the pointy end of the spears. We need people who are willing to navigate our systems and affect change, and use the court system to do that in order to set that precedent for other people and other groups and other issues and cases in the future. Because like I said, many other special interest groups and activist groups have been so effective at doing that over the years. But it's critically important, because when you look through like the court tribunal system and different decisions, there just aren't that many that deal with anti-Semitism. And then you see this horrific problem that we have in our Canadian society. And I'll talk about it a little bit later, but that's why I launched one of the cases that I launched, because we need to have a decision.
Yeah, so let me pick up on one word you used there, because I think it's a very important word. You said as long as it's used strategically. And by strategically, do you mean pick cases that can win or that can have success, or does strategically mean something different?
I think picking cases that can win, for sure. It can be very demoralizing for people if you've got this case and it's an important case, but the facts or the evidence just don't exist to make it a very viable or strong case. And picking cases where there is public support, or there's the timing, like the social appetite is there in order to make that case a success. You want to always win, right? And by the way, there's a big difference between winning in court and winning in the public, in sort of the public realm. Sometimes you can have these wins in court, and then you take your decision out into society, and people aren't ready to accept that yet. But you want to have a case that is going to be effective. And in order for it to be effective, you've got to make sure the evidence and the proof is there.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to take each of you to your own particular background in the combating the virus of anti-Semitism. It's important to use words like virus, because that's what it is. It's poison. So, Mark, you are among many of the things that you've accomplished during your illustrious legal career. You are the co-chair of CIJA. What does CIJA, the acronym, stand for again?
Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs.
All right. So you are the co-chair of CIJA's Legal Response Task Force. So can you just explain what that is and what you do as the co-chair?
Okay. Well, I'll do that. But if you want to know what I've done to advance the cause of fighting anti-Semitism, I'm going to go back into ancient history.
You do whatever you feel.
I always do.
That's all right. Just not to dinosaur age. It has to little past dinosaurs.
So first, a brief 60-second commercial for CIJA's Rapid Response Legal Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism. After October 7th, CIJA decided that the community needed to centralize legal responses to all the various manifestations of anti-Semitism that were being felt around the community, and to try to get a handle on what was happening, and to try to get a consistency of the response, and to try to leverage the goodwill of the legal community that wanted to volunteer to help. So what we've basically done is something that I think no other community anywhere in North America, anywhere in the world has tried to do. We basically have put together a pro bono law firm of volunteers who have volunteered their time to be ready to take on cases, either to run a whole case or to take on a part of a case, to do some research, to do interviews, to be a part of the solution. So we now have over 120 lawyers who have volunteered their time. We've divided ourselves. They deserve the credit. We've divided ourselves into 6 or 7. I lose track of the groups. There's a group that's dealing with campus issues, a group that is dealing with schools, that is our high schools. There's a group that is dealing with professional regulation. We have a group that is dealing with research. We have some other groups, and they're all good, real good groups. I'll think of what the other ones are in due course. And as cases come in, we have the benefit of a full-time law clerk who helps us with intake. We look at the cases. If it's just advising someone, we assign a person with experience in the field to talk to a teacher who's being harassed, a student on campus who is feeling uncomfortable in a classroom because the professor is doing strange and unusual things, and we give some advice. If there is a problem, a couple of physicians find themselves on the wrong end of a libel lawsuit. We have found some volunteers who will take the case to defend the physicians in the libel lawsuit. We're dealing with a couple of other things that I don't want to talk about, but in due course we will announce maybe some more proactive engagements with institutions that are being naughty.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure that the world sees that there's a limit to patience with institutions that are displaying anti-Semitic tendencies. So that's what we're doing. I have the honor, and I have to say the pleasure, of co-chairing this effort, which allows me to see the larger picture and to help marshal those resources. But Steve asked for war stories as to what we've done to combat anti-Semitism. I think the 2 cases where I think maybe I've contributed in some small measure. One involved someone whose name might be familiar to you, Ernst Zundel, where there were efforts to hold him to account criminally that didn't turn out so well. So around the turn of the millennium, the Canadian Human Rights Commission asked me to lead an application under the old Section 13.1 of the Canadian Human Rights Act, which allowed an application to be made against internet hate sites. I won't go into all the technical details. It involved me having to prove that the internet was a telephone. There are wonderful stories to be told about that, including the stupidity, if I can use a technical term, of the legal representation for Mr. Zundel, who wanted to show his internet site to the tribunal. So they brought in a computer, and they fired it up in order to show it in the tribunal hearing room, and those were the days of dial-up. So, sure enough, what we got was ring, 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 bring, 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 until they made the connection. So what did I have to prove? The internet's a telephone.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyhow, so that was the first case that the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal found that hate on the internet qualified under the Canadian Human Rights Act, and they published an order that he was to take down his internet hate site. In response, he left the jurisdiction, and within 2 years he was deported from the United States. Canada wouldn't take him back. Canada deported him to Germany. The Germans welcomed him with open arms and took him straight to prison.
Yeah.
For violating their laws of...
Where he dies in prison.
and he died shortly after he was released.
All right.
And the second case was the Whatcott case in the Supreme Court of Canada, where I appeared on behalf of the Canadian Jewish Congress to argue that it was constitutional for human rights codes in the provinces to regulate print media that propagated hate against an identifiable group. In that case, it was against LGBTQ people, but it applies obviously to Jewish people as well, and the Supreme Court found that it was constitutional. Yeah. So that's how the law can be used, not just criminally, but human rights codes.
I'll just say briefly that, Mark, you referred to Section 13 of the Human Rights Act. I represented the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center with Ed Morgan, who's now a distinguished Superior Court Justice, and we were dealing with the constitutionality of it, that it wasn't a violation of freedom of expression. We won the case in federal court. We won the Federal Court of Appeal, and a week after we won, Prime Minister Harper repealed the section. So that's the legacy of Section 13 of the Human Rights Act. So let's turn to you now, Catherine. Could you just mention, and please take the mic, the name of your law firm, because I think that should be noted as well.
Yes, so I'm a partner at Levitt Shake.
Okay, Levitt Shake. All right. So and as noted here, you're an employment, human rights, and civil litigation lawyer. And one case, and you've referred to it already, that's very prominent, is that a litigation where you're acting for about 30 members of Canada's largest union, CUPE, and you can tell us what CUPE stands for, that acronym as well. And they're alleging systemic discrimination, anti-Semitism by the union against them. And when you read some of the accounts of some of the members that are at least recounted in the media, I mean, it's just horrific. So can you talk about, and you're comfortable talking about this case because I know I asked you in advance, just something about the case, the litigation, and why it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually at about 80 litigants right now. I just I filed an addition on Friday. I call it File Friday. So I'm kind of planning like every Friday for the next few months to just keep refiling like more and more people, because literally every day I get emails from union members who want to join the lawsuit. And when just a bit of background. So I was approached by someone who is a member of the CUPE, that's the union, and she told me this story that over the past 15, 20 years, she has been trying to educate the union leadership about anti-Semitism. And she just had the most horrible stories about things that had happened to her. And she said, there's a whole group of us and we're done. We're sick and tired of our union dues funding discrimination against us. We have had enough. And for a lot of people in the union, the social media posts by Fred Hahn, who is the president of CUPE Ontario, celebrating the murder and rape of Jewish people in October was that was the line. They're done. That was the line. It was so disgusting and offensive. And so she said, well, I want to sue the union. And I said, great, bring me all your friends. And she did. So we have launched a case in the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario, alleging discrimination against QP and Fred Hahn personally. Of course, he's got to be right in there. We detail many things that the union has done over the years. But when I talk about strategic cases, this one, I could fill a whole room of banker boxes full of evidence of the things the union has done. It's terrible. The stories are unbelievable. But of course, they haven't even tried to hide it. I mean, there's evidence for all of these things that have happened, but we've launched the case. We're asking the tribunal to find that the union has engaged in discrimination against its Jewish members. We're asking for damages to be awarded, which I'm sure everybody will just donate, but also an order that Jewish members should be allowed to redirect their dues to a Jewish group of their choice. And that the union and the union leadership must undergo training and education about anti-Semitism by a group of the Jewish members choosing, again, and add to their union constitution anti-Semitism as being one of the grounds that is considered hate and people are protected from, because it's missing. It's not there. There's a whole list in their charter of what is discrimination, and that is everything is there under the sun that you could possibly think of. That's the one thing that's missing. So I don't think the union is used to being held accountable. I mean, this union, QP, gets away with a lot, and they're still at it, like Fred Hahn every single day. They're at it. They're doubling down. But when I talk about a strategic case, that's one of them. We have every intention to win and to win big. And every day, like I said, more people keep joining. And then a lot of people want to join, but they've told me, they're scared. I mean, the union leadership, they're a bunch of thugs. They are. So the people who have joined, they are incredibly brave to put their names out there. I don't mind getting, whatever. I get the crazy abuse and harassment. I'm used to it. Like, I kind of enjoy it. I'm like, bring it on. But, for everybody else, they don't know if tomorrow they're going to walk into their workplace and be fired. Yeah.
So I look at this case through the lens of a lawyer who's been involved through his career in criminal law and human rights, and I think this is a very important case, very important. So let me ask you this, Catherine, and you have all this formidable evidence and this brazen resistance against it, which can only enhance your chances. So let's assume you get to the finish line and you win this case, and you win it big. The question is, what impact does that have in a more general level against other unions and throughout? Does it work that way, or is it just only significant with QP?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've long battled the unions. It's just been something in my career that I'm very interested in doing, because every day I'm approached by union members who have some kind of terrible story of how their union has done them wrong or discriminated against them or harmed them. And the recourses available to people who are in a union are very limited. Unfortunately, they're stripped of their most important right in most cases, which is to sue the union. But there is a little channel, there is a loophole, and you can sue a union in the Human Rights Court. So unions are not used to being held accountable because you can't sue them in the civil court system. They're just used to getting away with whatever they want. So I think if we win this case, which we will, it's going to set a precedent for other unions. And I think that union leadership, they're going to have to make some changes. I know there's talks of other similar cases being launched in different provinces. And actually, one thing I'm working on right now is getting a group together, federal unionized employees, to launch basically a sister case, a mirror case in the Federal Human Rights Tribunal. But the goal really by the end of the year, next year, is to have an action in every single province and federally as well.
Right. So, Mark, the next question is directed to you, and the area is university campus anti-Semitism in Canada, which is an important issue. And so you've already made reference to this incredible moment, this transformative moment that occurred in the United States Congress about a week ago, where you had the presidents, three of the most, distinguished universities in the world, let alone America, MIT, Harvard, and Penn, give these nebulous, vague, almost indifferent answers about whether genocide, an exclamation, an announcement of genocide against Jews constitutes bullying and harassment. And indeed, the president of Harvard had the audacity to say that it depends on the context. I mean, what context can there be about genocide, of anyone? So the question is multifaceted, two levels of the question. How can we have any confidence that anti-Semitism on campus is going to be dealt with in a meaningful, cogent way if the leadership is so lacking from presidents of universities? And I know there's efforts to do the same thing with universities in Canada by the Liberal government. And secondly, this festering problem of campus anti-Semitism. You're as involved as a co-chair of this incredibly important task force. How do we deal with that? Do we just put our hands up in the air and say, there's really nothing we can do, or is there some concrete action we can take?
Stay tuned.
Well, it has to be a little bit more than that. A little bit. There's no teasers at Evenings with Steve. No
Look,
teasers.
I can't say an awful lot more concretely, but the issue of free speech versus hate speech has been percolating now for 30 years. Right. It went the wrong way in Zundel. It almost went the wrong way in the Keegstra case.
Very close case.
Very close, 5-4. And it's been trending the right way in the Supreme Court of Canada. We have to keep pushing to make it go the right way. We have to find the right cases and the right causes of action in order to make sure that it keeps going the right way. We can't let campuses off the hook. We can't let the pressure lessen. But it is a very, very difficult battle. There is an entrenched view that in the university, anything goes. That's why I started with my hokey example of have your cup of arsenic every morning. There are places on campus where every morning there are lecturers who greet their classes with a prescription of have a cup of arsenic every morning in order to understand what's going on in the Middle East. They are prescribing arsenic, and they are getting away with it. The question is, how can we draw attention to the fact that what they are prescribing is no less poisonous than if someone in a class in a medical school were to teach the medical students that the very best thing for preserving health would be to give your patients a prescription for arsenic. Until we can make that case effectively, we're going to keep seeing this. So, Catherine is right. You have to be intelligent, you have to be strategic. You have to find the right cases. Sadly, the cases are going to find us because the universities are finding ways to punish people for standing up to this kind of bullying. So we may find ourselves in the position where we have to defend people who stand up and say, no, this is wrong, this is hate, and are then being called on the carpet for resisting this kind of indoctrination and for calling it out. And that may be the way that we gain an entry into this debate. And if it isn't, as I say, stay tuned.
Okay.
There will be a reaction. It will happen. But we're not going to proceed with a losing case. We're not going to proceed with something that is going to be dismissed at a preliminary stage in the litigation. I won't say much because I don't like to criticize other endeavors, but there are some cases floating out there that, in my own humble opinion, should never have been started and run the risk of being dismissed at an early stage and embarrassing the community. We're not going to do that.
Yeah, and I'll be less tactful than you are. There is a major lawsuit against York University, and I've shared Mark's opinion about that, and I'm not part of any task force, so I'm quite prepared to be vociferous about expressing my opinion. And the danger of doing things like that, it actually can cause more damage than good. So what you're saying is stay tuned for accountability, right, Mark?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's important. Stay tuned because there's going to be meaningful accountability.
We believe very strongly in accountability, and we believe very strongly in not letting institutions off the hook just because they're august institutions.
So I'm gonna take two strands of two separate stories that I found and tie them together for my next question. All right. So there was an article in the National Post on the front page this week, which was extraordinary, dealing with Jewish teachers in Peel Region including Mississauga and Brampton, who have to deal constantly with this poisoned environment and anti-Semitic environment and just harassment and bullying and just this insipid description of what they have to live through every day. And then I was struck similarly, almost the same language, by a speech at a Shabbat dinner on behalf of the medical profession, Jewish doctors in Ontario, that was hosted by my good friend Dr. Jeffrey Lipsitz, who's present in this room and does incredibly important work in the community. And I read the speech of Dr. Aviva Lowe, who gave the speech about what doctors in this province are facing, and it was almost like plagiarism, and the things she described. And I'll just give you an example. As I read this speech, she talked about the medical profession being infiltrated in the medical literature with hateful letters by physician colleagues being published, infiltrating workplaces with colleagues wearing symbols that represent the annihilation of Israel and Jews. It infiltrates the streets where physicians have been identified as some of those shouting from the river to the sea, an intifada revolution, the loudest, infiltrated medical organizations, and on and on. So the question is, now we're looking at something different, not campuses, but professions. And I'll turn this to both of you. You're welcome to speak about this, Catherine, if you wish. How do we deal with anti-Semitism that now impacts the professions? And specifically now we're looking at teaching and medicine, but of course that's representative of a vast number of other professions as well. Ironically, maybe not law, which is the one area I think we're divorced from it, which is because there are just too many of us. There are just too many. We're an army, we're a battalion. Good luck, that's all I'd say. And that's just my own little anecdote. Okay, go ahead. So what would you like to say?
Yeah, I've been approached over the years by a lot of people in medicine and people like professors at universities and teachers who feel very silenced. My firm has represented people before their professional regulators for being censored. Jordan Peterson's one of our clients. But recently, I've had a lot of people consult with me who have been disciplined at work because they expressed an opinion, a pro-Israel opinion, and it was challenged by someone. And there's one case where they posted something on their personal social media, and a colleague saw it, and they get hauled into a meeting. And that's a very scary feeling when you feel that your livelihood is being jeopardized, and you know, this is your ability to put your food on the table, it's very frightening. And if you're part of a regulated profession like medicine, it can be very scary to go up against your regulator. At the end of the day, they can, you know, take away your license. And I have, you know, one of the areas that I work in is I help victims of sexual assault and trauma. And I've got to tell you, there's a lot of bad doctors who are licensed right now that the college doesn't seem to care about. But the college is very interested in doctors who are out there saying things and expressing viewpoints, whether it's about COVID or lately the terrorism that occurred in Israel. And what's happened with these self-regulated professions like medicine is you get people who are involved in the leadership who have their own personal opinions, and they just, you know, utilize the professional body as their vehicle to, you know, silence other people and to control. And the way to combat that is to hold them accountable, of course, and to fight the system. But a lot of people don't. I gotta tell you, people come to my office and they're like, Catherine, I'm scared. I think I will just sign this apology. I think I will just go to this like re-education program they want me to go to. You know, I think I'll do these things because I don't want to jeopardize my career. And so then you get, you know, the self-silencing, and you people all of a sudden, you know, who are normally very vocal, feel like they have to censor themselves and they can't talk. And that's a really bad thing. And it's been happening for a long time in Canada. And it's definitely, you know, it's getting worse. There's a professor that we represent who's suspended right now because they express a viewpoint. And again, it's just, you know, when you've got this situation where there's people who can just strip you of your job, it's very scary and it feels very isolating. And all of a sudden, all these people that you thought would support you, they kind of like disappear into the woodwork because they don't want to be targeted. So it's a very scary experience, but we just have to keep fighting it. We have to keep pushing back.
Yeah, Mark, did you want to add something?
My experience is that different professions are in different places. I don't think the medical profession is at the place yet where the College of Physicians and Surgeons is disciplining people for their opinions. There are professions that are, and I think Catherine is quite right about that. But what I was saying about how we may end up dealing with free speech versus hate in a defensive position may arise not at the college level, but at a different level, either in the university context or in the medical context, not at the regulatory level, but at the hospital level, where they do very definitely have some issues with direction from the top, but also at the high school level. And that's what Steve was talking about. There are principals in the system who have very definite opinions and are not afraid of throwing their weight around. Just to give you an example, today there was a Hanukkah party at one of the high schools in Thornhill, where the committee had invited a group of Shimshanim, that is the volunteers from Israel. The party was to start at 3 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, the principal said they can't come. No reason, and there is no basis to prevent them from coming, but can't come. It's that sort of subtle wielding of power on a discretionary and arbitrary basis that you find in Peel as well, and you find all over the place. And those are really difficult things. I mean, what Catherine was talking about is very true, but I want to look at it from a different point of view. People are justifiably reluctant to come forward and put their names onto a complaint because it's true. You step forward and you complain, the next thing that's going to happen to you is that your social media accounts are going to be flooded with all sorts of nasty stuff, and you are going to be targeted. You're going to be targeted as a Zionist oppressor, as a racist, as an enemy, and you will be identified perhaps for in your job for promotions. You will certainly be a potential target for retaliation. And it's a big deal when we ask someone, put your name forward and stand up to all of that. And I don't minimize the courage that it takes to step forward as a representative, as a plaintiff, or as a complainant in any of these matters. Medicine is going to be one of the next battlegrounds. It's because of the changing demographics in medicine. We don't have it in law, because the demographics in law have not changed. But the demographics in medicine have changed. The demographics in pharmacy have changed. The demographics in a number of professions have changed, such that there is an appetite for the kind of rhetoric that leads to anti-Semitism.
All right. So I'm just going to announce, I have one question. I'm not taking verbal questions, only written questions. I apologize. So I just have time for one question that I did receive from the audience, and then I want to deal with the area of hate crime, because we can't leave the discussion without examining that. And then there's going to be a reception. You're all invited to it. And I want to thank Mark and Catherine. They graciously agreed to come to the reception. And if you do speak to them, remember that a number of people want to speak to them as well. And just please abide by some protocol, not take the entire reception. You can give it to me. If I have time, I will be happy to take it. All right? You're my second question. All right. So Mark, this would be a question for you. It's very specific. DEI departments seem to exclude anti-Semitism from their mandates in universities and high schools. What is the legal remedy for that?
Not aware of a legal remedy. It's one has to protest that, and
These are, by the way, DEI is diversity,
diversity, equity, and inclusion.
and inclusion, right?
The committee that is in charge of DEI has to be confronted with the fact that anti-Semitism is a form of exclusion, inequity, and homogeneity. And that insofar as there are Jews in whatever institution is involved, the Jews want to have their position examined under DEI, just like every other equity-seeking group. And if that isn't the case, it has to be publicized.
All right. So, Mark, you made reference to this in your introductory comments, that the constitutional experience of looking at free speech, freedom of expression, the way we describe it in Canada, is vastly different in the two countries, because essentially in America almost anything goes. And we have a much more controlled examination. We learned from the American experience when the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was proclaimed in the early 1980s, and we didn't want to adopt that free-willing spirit of American, freedom of speech. So it's more controlled. So let's take that and now move to the area of hate crime. And hate crime has its own particular nuances and problems, and I'll let you deal with them. I'm certainly aware of them from my own background. and Catherine, please contribute if you wish to this question as well. So let me just give you one thing that happened recently. On the mural of the wall of the Niles Nadal Community Center and the epicenter of the Jewish community, it's Medina and Bloor. This promulgation, this promotion about genocide. On the wall, genocide against Israel. And it almost seemed that there was a reflexive feeling of helplessness that, there's nothing we can really do about that. So that's the question. That's the nub of the question. Is there nothing we can do about this?
The reason there's nothing we can do about it is we have to identify who did it.
Okay, but that's fair.
All right.
Let's assume, though, put that aside because that's a very valid point, and that's my fault. But assuming we caught the person who put the swastika at the front of this synagogue 3 years ago, and we caught him. Would that person be able to be prosecuted for a hate crime, for just forget about mischief to private property and all of that, but hate crime?
All right. Well, I don't dismiss mischief to private property
Right.
quite that
I
quickly, because I believe in Section 718, the hate motivation,
You're right.
which will
aggravating
elevate
fact.
it.
Yes.
But bear with me. The maximum penalty for a hate crime is no different than the maximum penalty if you bring a charge under mischief to property and you up it with 718.
All right. So let's look at protesters carrying placards that say the things. Not that they put them on buildings or they deface institutions, but they walk brazenly and openly through protests, saying those things with placards and saying, "I dare you to prosecute me."
All right. Well, I've 2 weeks ago I met with the chief of police, and he's ready to go. I met with the attorney general 3 days ago, 2 days, last Monday. My
Don't
life,
worry about it, Mark.
my life
Don't worry
is one
It's
long
okay.
day that never ends.
You're doing work of Kedusha, so it doesn't matter if you don't remember the days.
And he expresses real optimism that we can expand the definition of hate crime. It's a question of education, not of the public, but education of the justice sector. And so, one last war story. When I was Deputy Attorney General, this was a huge issue. What's the definition of a hate crime? And it was an educational issue. I am bound by cabinet confidentiality not to tell you all the stories, but it was a constant struggle, but it was a good struggle because you can talk to the people who are in charge of defining what constitutes a hate crime, and you can have intelligent conversations that leads to movement and leads to progress. From my own perspective, and here I'm going to sound like the president of Harvard, it does depend on context whether a swastika on the wall is a hate crime. In and of itself, it may not be. In and of itself, it's always mischief to property. It may be, if you catch the person and you see who he is, it may be mischief to property with a hate motivation, and it may be a hate crime as well. A chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, in my view, is a call to genocide. It has an objective meaning. It appears in the charter, in the 1988 charter of Hamas, and it is explained as meaning that from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, there must be a single Muslim country, and there is no room for negotiating with the Jews, and there's no room for Jews in that state. So it's a call for ethnic cleansing and, frankly, for genocide. That's the objective meaning of that phrase. There's going to be all sorts of discussions about, well, I thought it meant that everyone from the river to the sea should be free, regardless of who they are. There's a counter argument to that. By now, everyone knows that for Jews, it means we want to kill you. We want to at the very least, to send you back to Poland where you belong, if you can imagine that as a nice prescription. So yeah, it could be prosecuted. We have to educate the crowns who are in charge of advising the Attorney General, because the Attorney General has to consent to a charge under Section 319 sub 2 of the Criminal Code. And we have to educate the police, because they're the ones who are on the front line. And right now, they're making decisions as to what constitutes a hate crime based on rumor. What someone else tells them is a hate crime. And they're doing their best, but their best isn't good enough because they haven't been educated. That's where Steve's program is so important. And where other programs, where Mark Sandler has been doing a tremendous job in getting educational programs, where the Wiesenthal Center is doing a wonderful job getting programs. We've got to get as much as we can into the police and get them educated, but also to get the crowns educated, and to keep talking to the Attorney General and make it clear to him that the Jewish community is not a patsy. And we're not going to sit around and say, you tell us this isn't a crime, okay, it's not a crime. We're reasonable people. We understand. We're not reasonable people. We don't understand this anymore. Yeah. We know people are trying to kill us. We know people are chanting that it's time to get rid of all the Jews in Israel. And by the way, if you have been paying attention, they're now saying, Jews, go to Florida. That was the latest chant.
You know, Mark, I don't know if our audience appreciates how rare it is for a section of the criminal code to be implemented as a prosecution only with the specific consent of the Attorney General. It's just these rare, discrete areas. And hate crime, the drafters of the hate crime laws decided they wanted to be so rarely prosecuted. I'll just pitch in with my own view of this, is that if attorneys general don't have the political courage to stand up, I think there has to be political accountability. I think they have to be exposed. And I think we have the right to vote them out of power. We have the right to stand up to them. It's the one area in prosecutions that I think we have that power as people.
I think the problem, though, is like that. I think the problem with focusing on that approach is that the reality is our court systems are so gummed up that trials are getting dismissed right now in the criminal court system because they're taking too long. And I think spending time and resources trying to teach the judiciary and, police and the prosecutors about what is anti-Semitism, I can see why that feels like what we should be doing. But the problem is, even if all these charges were pressed, they're just frankly not going to go anywhere. Our court system is pretty much non-functional right now. I always think that we should do what all the other activists do, which is if there's some people at rallies saying horrific things, out them, shame them, cancel them on social media, go for their jobs. That works. All of a sudden, these people who are so courageous out there chanting hate, when you email their boss and you post a photo of them on social media and tag them, all of a sudden they go crying for the hills. It's effective, which is why lots of other groups have employed that strategy. I'm part of a WhatsApp group with a bunch of people who are on Twitter and vocal loudmouths like myself, and we every day we'll post Twitter accounts, like things that people are saying that are anti-Semitic and horrific, and we'll be like, today we are going to target that person. We're going to retweet their vile garbage, and we're going to hold them to account, and we're going to make their day miserable. And we do it every single day, because if you just sort of, and it works. I mean, they all of a sudden they're like, what do you, I'm not racist. I'm not anti-Semitic. It's like, yeah, you are. And like, oh, you work at a university. Oh, you're the head of this department. Does your boss know what you're doing? Let's tag them. And that works a lot faster than, getting the police to press a charge and then having like a trial 2 years later. It's just my
Mark,
view.
I'm going to give you, Mark, you have the final word.
Okay, I don't oppose that. I think it's a great idea, but a couple of caveats. A lot of these folks would love to get the free publicity because they think they're doing a great job, and their friends think they're doing a great job. So it's selectively effective, not universally effective. I think a better or a more pressing alternative is to reinstate a civil remedy for hate, which is what we had under the old Canadian Human Rights Act, and which, by the way, every other province of Canada, other than Ontario and Manitoba, has in their provincial human rights code. They have remedies for hate. That's what Whatcott was about. We're the only ones who don't. We could mount a very interesting campaign to demand that human rights tribunals, which aren't perfect by any means, but that they have get jurisdiction over hate. Now, again, Catherine's point is true in spades about human rights tribunals. They're about 4 years backed up, not just 2 years. But at least some sort of a civil remedy, or even, my dream is to have it enforceable by ordinary citizens. An ordinary citizen could bring an action for anti-Semitism. And one of the ideas we're mulling about is trying to see if we can create a new tort of willful promotion of hatred, because its time has come.
All right, so I want to leave time for the reception. So two of the written questions related to CUPE, and I've given them to Catherine. The two people who wrote those questions briefly can speak to Catherine about them. I'll try to find a couple of questions to give to Mark as well. There's one dealing with remedies for Jews who paid for a bus to the Israel rally to Ottawa, and then the bus company canceled the trip. So I'll give a couple to Mark as well. So unfortunately, it's just the exigencies of time. We could have had a 2-hour program. So I apologize to those of you who've taken the time to write questions. It's just I can't do it. So I just wanted to mention, because I don't believe the people who are watching on the live stream are aware of this, the Beth Shalom Synagogue has donated $500 to both Mark and Catherine's in their name, in their honor, to Stand With Us Canada, which is an organization dedicated to combating anti-Semitism on university campuses and I believe high school campuses in Canada. So I think that, I'm sure as you listen to this program, it's impossible not to leave with a sense of just how vital the issues that we've been addressing tonight are. And this is really, we've touched the surface, but we've done it, I think, in a cogent and meaningful way that leaves you with simply an understanding and really a sense of relief that we're not just throwing our hands up as a community and saying, what are we going to do about it? Oh no, we're going to do something about it. And I tie it into the very initial point I made, which is that we can have protests, we can have rage, we can have frustration, but at the end of the day, where we're looking for meaningful accountability, it's going to be through legal remedies, harnessing the law to punish, make people accountable, and to do our best to stop the scourge of anti-Semitism. So I want to thank both Mark and Catherine for this illuminating discussion. Thank you all for being here. Thanking the people who watched on live stream, this invisible audience. And just mention again, the next program I'll be doing, describing my new book, Pharaoh and the Murder at Smoke Lake. That'll be on January 25th. the Next Evenings with Steve program. Thank you again, everyone, and have a good night.
It's very frustrating listening to you all. It's frustrating because I want to hear an answer. I want to hear like a real example where you could just say, this happened. This.
Hi, I'd like to just thank you, Catherine and Mark, for spending the time with us this evening and for all the amazing work that you do. We're looking forward to seeing the results of your hard work and all the whatever happens next. We're going to keep an eye on it.
Join us for coffee, everyone, please.
Thank you.
Mark, these are your two.
Well, the solution is a process, right?
No, but I like how you approach things. I like listening to you.
Did you enjoy the program?
And thank you to Stephen. Stephen, thank you for hosting this wonderful program.
Thank you, Steve, for your time and your wisdom always and your generosity. Please join us in the lobby for a dessert reception.